Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. And if you're new to Figure It Audi, welcome. The point of that intro was it is the dead of winter here in Alberta. It's cold, lots of snow. And you know, the roads aren't great here at the best of times, but this year they're using tons of salt and gravel. I was showing you evidence of that as it's taking a toll on the event, and I'm seeing lots of salt standing around the doors, concrete, anywhere where the water is basically melting and drying. So there's plenty of reasons to care about the protection of the bottom of your car. That being said, I have a confession. I've been driving around with no belly pan on this car for, I don't know, maybe 2 years now. Now granted, I don't take this car out in the winter. I don't even like driving it in the rain, but I've been really hesitant to drive it at all without anything on down there. If you're watching this video, I'm willing to bet that your belly pan's fate was similar to mine in the sense that these things are really only held on by a bunch of quarter turn screws like this and speed nuts. And whether it's us or shops, you know, they fall out and they don't get replaced. And then the integrity of your belly pan, which normally sits right about here, is compromised and starts flapping around, dragging on the road, or you might just tear it off in a fit of rage, which is what I did. So these things are only held on, a couple in the front, a few on the sides by the fender well, and then 3 along this bracket in the back. And of course, this bracket is normally hanging onto the back of the subframe and these screws right here. But what's kind of funny, and during the research of this video, I found out is that there's supposed to be yet another belly pan that protects the transmission. In fact, when I started rolling around back here, I found the old clip still in place on the very back of the subframe. So who knows where this belly pan is, but it was never here in my ownership. In fact, if you still have both of your OE belly pans installed down there and the cover that goes across this section, post in the comments so your peers can give you a thumbs up for being 1 in a million. So really at this point, you've got 2 options. You can either replace the OEM belly pan, you can spend probably $300 going through the dealer for that, or find one from an aftermarket builder or someone else's car secondhand, or you can go full on skid plate. So as if it wasn't already obvious what we're doing here today, we're going to be looking at and installing the ECS Tuning Street Shield aluminum skid plate. What you see here comes for about $250 American when it's on sale. And you get the skid plate for all A4B7s, plus all necessary mounting hardware, and the riv nut installation tool. ECS says that this plate is 4 millimeters thick and weighs about 14 pounds. And to me right there, that's probably the biggest con of this project. It's great the protection you're gonna get, but compared to the OEM shield, for better or for worse, it's really light. So obviously we're adding a ton of weight to the front end of the car, and it's really hard to shave those pounds off, especially because all the performance stuff that you end up usually doing means you're putting heavier, thicker material on, and you're only adding weight to your car. If you're watching from the UK, you would describe this as 5052 aluminum construction. So as a 5000 series aluminum alloy, it means primarily it's mixed with magnesium, and that gives us 2 really good benefits. The first one is simply strength. So this is usually known as a very strong material, and ECS hasn't given us a hardening value, so we don't know if this has gone through extra strain hardening, but I'm sure this is very durable. The second great aspect is corrosion resistance, and obviously that's something I value very much. Cars around here are very rusty just because of the climate, and I've already shown you there's tons of salt on the ground for about 4 months out of the year, so this should be perfect for me. Yep, about 4 millimeters is accurate. The reason I wanted to measure that is because there's really only a second option in the North American market for an aluminum skid plate, and that's the Thor skid plate. That one's on screen right now. It's definitely a different design with those 2 flaps on the side, but it is 4.8 millimeters thick, also of aluminum 5052, and that puts it up at 16.7 pounds. I'm sure it's beefy and strong, but is that extra weight worth it? Okay, let's get on with the install. So I'm actually not going to start with this hardware here because, heads up, you must have your splash shields installed to do this. I had to go dig mine out of the attic, and I was really happy when I found them because I thought I might have thrown them out with the belly pan, but you must have this. Also note that it takes a quarter turn plastic dowel to hold it to the fender liner right here. This one's just a regular Torx screw like all the other ones in here. But you absolutely have to have this in place because on that flat lip right there, you're going to be mounting part of the skid plate. If you're missing any of these parts, don't worry, they're not super expensive. I've got the part numbers down in the description of this video if you need them. And as for this hole right here, it used to have another quarter turn plastic dowel in it too, and that held the fender liner to another part of the OEM belly pan. But from here on out, that hole is just going to remain unused. The first real part of the installation and the secret sauce to how we're holding up this 14-pound skid plate onto a car is riv nuts. So what I have in my hand is the riv nut installation tool that ECS gives you as part of this kit, which is really nice. And on screen are the riv nuts. The reason they're on screen is because I actually installed them a few years ago and then I stopped the install right there. That's how long this skid shield has been in my part stash. Anyways, you need to use these riv nuts because you need to support the plate by something solid, more than that little flimsy bracket for OEM. And we're using 2 empty holes in the subframe to basically put in the nut and create threads where there were never threads before. That way we can use these big bolts here and washers through these mounting holes right there to support the bulk of the weight of this plate. Not to skip that part of the DIY, here are the ECS images on screen, and really all you're doing is putting a riv nut on the end of the tool, put that tool up into one of the empty holes in the subframe, nice and flush, then counteract the pressing screw with a adjustable wrench up on the top, and then you can drive home the pressing screw with an 18mm deep socket or an H8 size Allen key until it's 20 foot-pounds. And then to loosen the tool, just turn counterclockwise on the pressing screw, and what it should look like is this, nice and flush with the subframe. And just like that, you and I are now on the same step. Next up, underneath the car, we just want to double check that some of the old hardware is now removed and out of our way. So it's possible that there would have been 3/4 turn screws and their washers stuck in these big holes in the bumper cover. So make sure those are all gone. And then there could be some speed nuts still in place out on the edges of the core support, just like this here. There's going to be one on each side that you'll need to make sure is gone. And then there's one more in the middle, actually on the metal part of the intercooler piping. Take that out too. My 3 remaining speed nuts came off pretty dirty, which tells me those mounting points aren't that clean. And it just so happens that I have a pack of these gunk wipes. I've never tried these before. It was just a sample I got on another piece of gunk product. So I'm going to give this a try. I think this is kind of a cool time to give it a go. It's got a rough side and a smooth side, I think. And I'm going to just give it a little rub on those mounting points and kind of see what comes off. Wow, these are pretty big. Oh my God, it goes way back there. Ugh. There you go. That's how you claw back some of that 14 pounds of weight. You know what? These hold up pretty good. Now that the 3 mounting points on the core support areas are nice and clean, we're going to install another set of clips. So these are similar in the sense that they slide on, but the top part of them right here is threaded. We're going to need that later for mounting some extra hardware for the belly pan. And there's also this little middle layer here. See that sort of thing sticking up there? When you hear it install correctly, you should hear it pop, because that is going to hold it into the circle part right there. Next up, we're just going to install 5 of these 1/4 turn clips, and there is an orientation to it. See those 2 little teeth? They have to be facing up, just like it is right now. Out on the corners where those splash guards I was talking about are, and then the 3 most forward holes on the shield. It's time to mount this sucker. All right, so I got the plate mounted up. It was definitely annoying and a little painful to do by myself, but it's possible if you're in the garage alone. However, that kind of doesn't really matter because I'm already seeing some major fitment issues. By far the hardest part of this install was getting the side of the bumper cover to actually wrap around and under the skid plate, because I think the boys could have spent a little bit more time in CAD. It looks like the wings come out here a little too far. Look how much deflection is in this bumper cover. Usually this line doesn't go down towards the wheel. It tucks up really nicely into the splash guard here. And this should be almost up here. We're way, way out. And because of all the tension that's happening out on the edges here, the front of the skid plate is being pressed really hard up against the front lower core support, which is a problem because we need to get some spacers up on top of that shield right away. So what we need to do is actually change the pitch of the shield and bring the front down a little bit. You can see why this is necessary, because if you look in just under the shield here, look at the front sway bar right there. It is, millimeters away from touching the skid plate, and the skid plate is on an incline right now. So we need to bring down the front level a little bit. To install the spacers, they need to go above the skid plate. That means we need to actually pull down and slip them above. Make sure that all the holes are obviously lined up with those 3 black clips that we put onto the rad supports that have threads on top. And I'm going to do an example on this middle one here. It's kind of the cheating example because there's easy hand access space. The ones on each of the other sides are not so much the case. You're kind of slipping it through the bumper cover like that and then up. But really it's just a matter of gently sliding in the spacer, pulling down, not losing it. And it's easy to take a pick or something like that and just make sure it goes all the way through so you know that The bolt is going to go in easily, and then take your hardware, make sure it's threading, and I've got an H4 size Allen socket here. And we're just going to cinch it up, not tight, just snug enough.
Houston, we have a problem.
The next step is a simple one. It was just to install these 5 quarter-turn screws into the speed nuts, but I cannot get these things to fully seat. I think that the OEM spec hardware here isn't long enough to pass through what is now a much thicker shield. Normally, this same length of bolt would pass through the bumper cover, which is obviously a constant here, but the shield's 4 mil thick and the old one is what, 1 or 2? So no matter how hard I push, and I'll show you in a second the actual example, these things are just being held in by tension. So don't be fooled. A little bit of vibration, it's not in there at all. Case in point, let me install this quarter turn screw just into the speed nut by itself. All right, it's fully seated. I'm pushing down, it's locked in. Look at the maximum amount of space right there that you could use to pin it to something. There's absolutely no way you're gonna get, for example, the thickness of this mud flap to get into here. So I'm in a situation now that I didn't really expect to find myself in. I don't really like how finicky the spacer hardware is. I have no confidence in the quarter turn hardware, and I really don't like the side fitment out by the edges of the bumper cover. So what I'm gonna do is change it. I'm gonna solicit the help of some people who can do some fab work, and I'm gonna change the hardware setup and do some trimming. When the plate was still mounted on the car and all the holes on the front end lined up with the rad support, so I knew that it was in the good position, I did a little bit of tracing around the bumper cover with the Sharpie here. These are the areas on the edges I plan to clearance, and that should alleviate a lot of the pressure issues that I'm noticing. So a week later here, I have all the hardware and modifications done so I can move forward. So right off the bat, shout out to Aaron at ArcFab Performance here in the city. I decided to reach out to him. They get a lot of love on the local Facebook Euro group, so I wanted to give him a shot, and frankly, I think it's really great what turned out here. So to summarize what we did, we permanently welded these spacers to their original locations. So first of all, I won't have to fiddle with those under the bumper cover and above the plate when it goes in. I can just slide it right in. And then the big change is we completely eliminated all the quarter turn hardware. So in their place, what he did was he took aluminum bar and then drilled and tapped it to an M8 and then welded it into place permanently as well. And the nice part about the height here is that the spacers still remain the highest thing, so it holds the plate down below the core supports, and we won't have any clearance issues on any of these places where there used to be speed nuts. Then out on the edges, they did some trimming. Pretty simple, but they did a great job. Followed my Guess Sharpie line pretty good, kind of polished it up so it's not sharp or anything. And then last, on the hardware end of things, we're staying with the original spacer hardware. That stuff's fine. Big bolts in the back, that's okay too. But what we're doing is all stainless hardware to go through those taps. What we have are M8 Allen heads, this is just what I was able to find, plus washers and a lock washer. I think it's only right that we address the cost for a second because the fabrication costs here, and in no way am I taking away from the quality of work that was done or the value of it, because I think it's awesome working with pros who are in your city. God knows right now small businesses are hurting and you got to help out wherever you can. So I love the work that's done, but the cost of it was more than the skid plate itself. And had I been shopping on ECS and had a crystal ball and known that I'd be putting, double into it, maybe I would have gone with an aftermarket version of the OEM plate instead because it's just worth it. And after all that, it's the moment of truth. I'm going to try to install it here and we'll see how the fitment is.
Good news, everyone!
In addition to the plate being really easy to install now, I'm going to have a neck like Popeye from laying on the ground trying to hold my head up and do these videos. So the plate was really easy to go in, largely thanks to the permanently mounted spacer hardware above the plate now. You can just slide in the front of the plate and off you go into the fastening. However, I did run into a bit of an issue, and it's totally my fault for the record. I had to get my Akira Nikai on a bit and do some trimming of the body. That's totally my fault, not Aaron. He cut the plate where I wanted him to. I just didn't realize that I still needed the plate to move a little bit forward, and I was running into resistance around the bumper, and I didn't really know where to cut it, so off I went, clearancing the whole thing. Also, the new hardware is really easy to install, looks fantastic, really strong. I love it. A bit of a miscalculation on my part, which is not surprising, is that right above this point right here is the metal part where the lower core support reaches up and connects to the intercooler piping. There's a little bit of a clearance issue up there, still totally fit, but I can tell that, yes, I will absolutely need to trim down some of that hardware. The one very final problem I'm having is that the holes for the bumper cover in the front here, for the 3 that we replaced the quarter turn hardware with, these holes do not match up with the holes in the skid plate. They're off by maybe 1/2 inch and sideways, which is kind of odd because the rest of the plate is exactly where it needs to be. The mud flaps line up and are bolted in perfectly. The bolts where the riv nuts are very much centered. And of course, all of our other hardware is in. And no matter how much I manipulate it with the plate a little bit loose, I cannot get these to line up. So I'll have to just do what I need to and clearance a little bit more of the hole here and do some trimming. I'm on my last hole. Of course, it's the ugliest one to show you, but just in case you're going down the same ridiculous road I'm on, know that I just took a razor blade and I notched into the same lip as I cut out before, just to give myself something flat to put a washer against. Just to be super sure that there's no corrosion occurring between the stainless steel hardware and the aluminum threads, I've been installing these with a little bit of anti-seize on it, and I don't need to worry about the torque because that's why I have a lock washer. The absolute final part of the installation here is to permanently install these 2 big 16 mil bolts at the back. Keep in mind they've just been temporarily sitting in the subframe to hold up the skid plate, and because they can vibrate loose, I've got a little blue Loctite on here, and these go in at 20 foot-pounds. Now that the skid plate's fully installed, I can tell this thing is rock solid. Not a single vibration in here. I feel very good about having this on the car now. What you can also see way out on the edges is that, and keep in mind, I didn't do any trimming on the back, there's lots of room for the sway bar out on the edges. No problems there. Another cool thing about this plate, and this is my guess anyways, is some added cooling efficiency for the oil pan. The air is going to get sucked up into this hole and then go across the bottom of the skid plate and get ejected out the back. Hopefully a little bit of a decrease on the oil temps. You'll have to go back in the video to take a better look, but there's a flap that's bent up in this hole too. It isn't just an open hole like this one. And I think what's going on is that as the air comes up for the oil pan, it gets kicked up for the transmission too, to get even more cooling out on the bottom of the transmission. Just as a bit of final validation here, I feel really good about the hardware changes that I made. It was a bit above and beyond, I'll definitely admit, but now I am confident that I could take this plate down in a couple of minutes and put it back up in maybe 5. I am happy to say this project is done. I am really glad to have this on the car now, but I admit that I way over-engineered the solution here. There's no way that the bumper cover needs to be held that securely onto the front of the skid plate, but I wanted to do what I felt was right. I wanted to make sure this thing was on there really, really well, and I wasn't going to be losing hardware. But truly, sound off in the comment section if you've installed this skid plate or the Thor plate or any other plate that I'm not aware of, and just tell me how your installation went. Tell me what you think of some of the modifications I did here, and tell me what you might have done in your own fixes. My final parting thoughts here are more for ECS than anything, but I think a lot of the problems with this kit could be eliminated simply by putting a bend on the wing. I did trim a lot of it, but if there was a bend, much like the one up here, maybe 15-20 degrees up, so it actually tucks up into the bumper and doesn't push down on the edge so much, I think that would fix a lot. In terms of the quarter turn hardware, maybe you could pre-weld a Zeus spring on the top, so you can still stay with quarter turn dowels in the front, but you can just depend on something that is going to be long enough and secure really, really well. As I always say at the end of all my videos, thank you so much for watching. Please do consider subscribing and throw any comments my way. Just know that I've been hoarding parts like crazy and I've got lots more projects planned, so please join me next time.